The sky was the kind of grey that made everything seem quieter, more distant, like the world itself was mourning. Elena Morgan stood under a black umbrella, the cold drizzle pattering softly on its nylon surface as she stared at the closed casket being lowered into the ground. Her fingers clutched the handle tightly, knuckles pale from the pressure. She hadn't cried yet, not really. There was a lump in her throat, a weight in her chest, but no tears. Her father, Richard Morgan, was gone. The small cemetery outside of Willow Creek was filled with familiar faces, neighbors, former students, fellow professors from the university where he taught European history. All of them said the same thing. He was such a brilliant man. I had him my freshman year, changed my life. Your father had integrity. You should be proud. Elena nodded politely at each comment, offering tired smiles and automatic thank yous, but something in her felt strangely detached, as if she were watching the day unfold from behind glass. It wasn't just the grief, it was something else, something that had been gnawing at her since the night he died. She couldn't forget the phone call from the hospital. He'd collapsed at the library. Heart attack, they said. Sudden, massive. Nothing anyone could have done. She had raced down from Chicago to Willow Creek, a 3-hour drive that passed in a blur of silence and highway signs. When she arrived, he was already gone. But it wasn't just his death that unsettled her. It was what came after. A woman she didn't know had shown up at the hospital looking shaken, middle-aged, well-dressed and clearly distressed. "I'm sorry," she said to Eleanor, eyes flickering. I just needed to see him. Just one last time." Eleanor assumed she was a colleague, or perhaps a former student, but the woman hadn't. Joined the other mourners at the funeral. She hadn't given a name. And then there was the voicemail. Elena had discovered it the morning after he died. Her father's voice, low and hurried. "Elena, listen. I need to talk to you. There's something I never told you. It's important. If anything happens to me, go to the study. The locked drawer. Use the key in the desk lamp base. You'll understand." She'd played it 3 times. Then she deleted it. She didn't know why. Maybe shock or fear of what it meant. But now, standing over the fresh earth where her father lay, the words echoed in her mind louder than the voices around her. "There's something I never told you." The ceremony ended quietly. A few close friends lingered, offering final condolences. One man, a tall professor with a long grey beard and tweed coat, took her hand and gave her a serious look. "Your father was a man of many layers," he said cryptically. "Brilliant, but complicated." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, but he only smiled faintly and patted her shoulder. "You'll understand in time." That was not the first odd comment of the day. Back at the reception held in the church hall, a young woman approached her, a stranger in a dark green coat, not dressed quite like the others. She had sharp features and piercing eyes. "You're Richard Morgan's daughter." "Yes," Elena said. The woman hesitated. "He talked about you a lot." "Did you know him?" "Sort of. I mean, he helped me. A few years ago he was kind." The woman looked like she wanted to say more, but then she shook her head. "Never mind. I'm sorry for your loss." Before Elena could respond, the woman turned and left. Elena watched her go, unsettled. How had her father helped this stranger? What exactly had he done? Her father had always been private, but she'd never suspected anything odd. He was a historian, a reader, a gentle soul who loved old books and classical music. After her mother died when Elena was 15, he had thrown himself even more into his work and into raising her. Their bond was close, but now, standing amid all these vague hints and half-spoken comments, she began to wonder how well she had really known him. The rest of the day passed in a fog. She made the necessary rounds, accepted casseroles, nodded at small talk, but her thoughts never strayed far from that voicemail, from the word study, from the locked drawer. That night, she returned to her father's house. It had always been a cozy, book-filled home. Rows of shelves, warm wood floors, the scent of old paper and pipe tobacco still lingering faintly in the air. Everything was just as he'd left it. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, pausing at the photographs. On the mantel, her parents on their wedding day, her father holding her as a baby, Elena at high school graduation beaming up at him. How could a man with so much love in his life keep a secret big enough to haunt her after his death? Finally, she reached the study. The door was locked. That was nothing new. He'd always kept it locked, claiming it was where he did his deep work. As a child, she had never been allowed in. Even as an adult, the rule had remained. She had never questioned it before. The desk lamp on the hallway table caught her eye. Her fingers trembled as she unscrewed the base. Inside was a tiny metal key. He meant this. He really meant this. The key fit the study door perfectly. The door creaked open. The air inside was colder, dustier. The curtains were drawn, and the only light came from a faint desk lamp in the corner. Books were stacked everywhere. Not unusual, but there were also files, boxes, and stacks of newspapers in languages she didn't recognize. A large map of Eastern Europe was pinned to the wall with markings and lines drawn across it in red. Her father's computer sat on the desk, locked with a password. She'd deal with that later. Her eyes scanned the room. Then she saw it, the desk, a small drawer with a keyhole. She knelt, slipped in the tiny key from the lamp, and turned. Click! Inside was a manila envelope. Her name was written on the front. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Inside were several documents. A birth certificate with a name she didn't recognize. James Holden. A passport. Driver's license. All with her father's face, but a different identity. There was also a black notebook. On the first page, in her father's handwriting, were the words, "Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. There are things I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you. Now you need to know the truth." Elena sat down heavily in the old leather chair. Her heart pounded. The room swam around her. Everything she had ever believed about her father, the man who raised her, who taught her to ride a bike, who made pancakes on Saturdays, was cracking, open like ice on a lake. She didn't know what lay beneath, but she was going to find out. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of old floorboards and the ticking of a wall clock somewhere in the hallway. The kind of silence that demanded attention, thick, expectant, almost alive. Elena sat in her father's leather chair in the study, the black notebook open on her lap, the manila envelope now resting on the desk beside her. The notebook didn't contain a confession, at least not in the conventional sense. It was more like a set of breadcrumbs, notes scattered across pages in messy but precise handwriting, full of dates, names, and cryptic observations. Met with ES at Lincoln Park. Cafe, March 14. Suspect she's under surveillance. Storage Unit 509B. Keep it off record. Giles definitely compromised. Stay quiet. None of it made immediate sense, but one thing was clear. Her father, or James Holden, had been involved in something far more complex than university. Lectures and academic journals. Elena took a deep breath and closed the notebook. She needed to ground herself, start from what she knew, and work outward. Richard Morgan had always kept the study off limits. Now she could see why. The room had layers, literally and figuratively. Beneath the obvious clutter of books and papers was an underlying organization, a hidden life, carefully constructed. She stood up and began looking more closely. In one corner, she found a locked filing cabinet. Her fingers automatically tried the same key from the drawer, and to her surprise, it clicked. Inside were folders labeled with odd titles: Darwin 22C, Glenbridge Ops, Holden Contacts. She opened one at random, Glenbridge Ops. Inside were surveillance photos. One showed a man in a grey suit speaking to someone in front of a courthouse. Another showed the same man entering a nondescript office building. In the corner of each photo was a handwritten date, 2016, 2017. Some as recent as last year. There were also typed reports, pages of them, written in the terse, factual language of intelligence work. Subject has made regular visits to 92 Glenbridge Ave. Building registered under Aegis Solutions, a suspected shell company, possible link to fraud investigation in 2015. What was this? She opened another folder. This one had phone logs, spreadsheets, and a series of receipts from hotels in different cities. Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago. Her father had always told her he hated travel. Just conferences, he used to say. Boring stuff. Elena suddenly wondered how many of those conferences were real. On the desk, she noticed the corner of a photograph sticking out from beneath a stack of research papers. She pulled it free. It showed her father in a sunlit park, wearing sunglasses and smiling at a woman Elena had never seen before. A young boy, maybe 6 or 7, stood between them. Her heart thudded. He looked happy, casual in a way she rarely remembered. He wasn't posing like in family photos. This looked real, genuine. On the back was a date, May 2018, just 7 years ago. Elena stared at it for a long time. Who were they? A friend, a colleague and her child, or something more? Shoving down the tight feeling in her chest, she turned her attention to the computer. The password screen glowed faintly. She tried a few combinations. His birthday, her mother's name. Nothing worked. Then she looked again at the notebook. On the top corner of the first page, in small print, was a string of characters. VLG73ELN, she typed it in. The computer unlocked. The desktop was neatly organized. 3 folders stood out immediately. Project Blackwell, Archives, Halden, and Contingency. Her fingers hovered over the mouse. She opened Contingency. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each labeled with initials, some familiar, others foreign. Each one addressed the recipient directly and appeared to be intended for delivery in the event of Richard's death. She opened the one labeled EM. Her breath caught as her own name appeared at the top. Elena. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I wish I could explain everything in person, but the truth is too dangerous to have shared while I was alive. I hope you'll understand that I only ever wanted to protect you. My name is not Richard Morgan. That was an identity I assumed many years ago. Before that, I was James Holden. I worked as an undercover investigative journalist. I embedded myself in places most people wouldn't dare go: corporate corruption, covert government programs, high-risk whistleblower cases. I made enemies. I thought I could leave it all behind, start fresh. But some things never truly stay. Buried. If you choose to keep digging, and I believe you will, you'll find a key in the back of this drawer. It opens a storage unit in the city, 509B. Inside is everything, the full truth. But be careful. They're still watching. I'm sorry. I love you. Dadalina sat back, stunned. Investigative journalist, enemies, storage unit. The words felt too big to fit in her mind. All this time she had thought he was just her quiet, scholarly father who loved maps and old books. But now she was starting to see the man behind the curtain, and he was a stranger. She looked again at the photo on the desk. Was that part of the truth too, as the shock slowly settled into her bones, her instincts as a researcher, something she'd inherited? From him, took over. She stood up and retrieved the rest of the items from the desk drawer. A second key was taped to the bottom, just like he'd written. There was also a flash drive. She plugged it into the computer. Inside were scans of more documents, voice memos, and a folder titled Eva S. Inside that folder were photos of the same woman from the earlier picture, along with documents. Driver's license, employment records, even a background check, Eva Sinclair. He had been watching her, or be protecting her, Elena wasn't sure which scared her more. There was also a document named Sinclair background.txt. She opened it. Subject: Eva Sinclair, former lab technician, Aegis Solutions. Whistleblower. Contacted Holden in 2015 regarding Project Blackwell. Possible custody situation. Connection to Thomas Sinclair, estranged husband, Aegis Security. Relocated to Oak Hollow under witness protection cover story. Strong emotional ties suspected. Elena blinked at the screen. Witness protection. Whistleblower. Custody situation. How deep did this go? She leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the old house. Rain tapped softly against the glass. She had choices now. She could close the computer, return to Chicago, and try to forget. Or she could follow the trail her father left for her, to the storage unit, to Eva Sinclair, to the truth. She looked at the key in her hand. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point. She slid the key into her coat pocket, turned off the lamp, and stepped out of the study, locking the door behind her. Tomorrow she would go to the city, and she would begin to find out who her father really was. Elena arrived at the edge of the city just as the morning sun pushed its way through the remnants of a grey dawn. The clouds hung low, tinged with orange, as she pulled her car into the gravel lot of Blue Rock Storage, a squat complex nestled between a shuttered factory and a railroad overpass. Unit 509B. The key felt heavy in her pocket. She stepped out of the car, her boots crunching against loose stone. Around her, the rows of storage units stood quiet and still, each painted in the same peeling blue and white. There was a strange weight to the place, as if the walls themselves held secrets. Elena approached the row marked 500-520, counting off the units until she reached the one her father had written about. 9B. She hesitated, the key poised in her hand. This is it. The lock clicked open with surprising ease. She lifted the roll-up door slowly, and it groaned upward to reveal a dim, dust-coated interior. Sunlight filtered in through a small vent near the back, revealing tarps, cardboard boxes, and what appeared to be an old military-style duffel bag. The air was stale, like paper and metal and time. Elena stepped inside, heart thudding. It didn't feel like a random stash of forgotten belongings. Everything was placed deliberately. She reached for the duffel bag first and unzipped it. Inside were a stack of bundled cash, at least $10,000 in mixed bills, a burner phone with a dead battery, a flash drive sealed in a plastic sleeve, a handgun wrapped in an oiled cloth, a folded map with several red markings. She stared at the gun for a long moment, then closed the bag again. So much for the quiet professor image, she thought grimly. She turned to the boxes. The first one was filled with files, handwritten notes, printed reports, and photographs. One showed her father speaking with a man in what looked like a private hospital courtyard. Another was grainy surveillance footage, time-stamped and labeled in the same neat handwriting from the notebook at home. Subject: G. Renner, Aegis Solutions. She'd seen the name Aegis before, in the computer files. Her father had been investigating them. Hard. The second box held even more damning contents, documents with government seals, classified stamps, and letters marked confidential. Some were written in formal, cold, bureaucratic tone. Others, like the letter from someone identified only as MT, read more like a warning. James, you were right. They're burying Project Blackwell. Eva's in danger. You need to go dark. They've already started watching your house. Elena felt a chill crawl up her spine. Project Blackwell again. She didn't know what it was, but it had followed her. Farther across years, cities, and identities. The third box was more personal. Photographs, lots of them. Some of Elena and her father over the years. Birthdays, graduations, her first trip to college. Others were of people she didn't know. One series, taken in sequence, showed a woman, Eva Sinclair, walking a child, to school, always from a distance, always with a different background, parks, bus stops, city sidewalks. There were notes attached to the backs. Eva, Oak Hollow, 2020, still in hiding. Jason, age 7 now, looking more like her. Unconfirmed tale. White sedan, same plates 3 times. Who was tailing them? Why was her father monitoring them, or was he protecting them? Elena sat down on a metal folding chair leaned against the back wall. She needed to process everything. But as she turned the flash drive over in her hand, the urge to understand, to finish what he'd started, grew stronger. She pulled out her laptop and powered it on. It took a minute to wake. The storage unit had no Wi-Fi, but her father had, always labeled things well. The flash drive had a sticky note, B encrypted, use Hgate archive PW. She remembered the folder labeled Archives Holden back in his computer. She had written down the password, VLG73ELN. She entered. A series of folders opened. Blackwell Docs testimony, E. Sinclair, Holden audio, red files, copies. She clicked into the Blackwell Docs folder. Page after page of scientific and legal documents filled the screen. She scrolled through files with chilling names. Human trial. Viability. Memo 203EX. Subject memory suppression protocols. Phase 2. Project Blackwell. Internal oversight audit. The language was clinical, but the implications were terrifying. Her father had stumbled onto something dark. Something that could ruin lives, possibly end them. One particular document stood out, a summary report titled Phase 2 Subject List, terminated, displaced, names, ages, locations, all redacted except for a few entries. She saw one, subject Sinclair, Eva status, relocated, protective custody notes, potential breach, high risk, monitor, indefinitely. Another listed only an initial, JS, likely Jason, the boy in the photos. Elena backed out of the folder and clicked into testimony. E. Sinclair, a video opened. Her father's voice came through calm and steady. Eva, just speak as clearly as you can. Say whatever you feel comfortable saying. The camera angle was low, focused on a woman in her 30s. Dark hair pulled into a loose bun, hollow eyes. My name is Eva Sinclair. I worked at Aegis Solutions from 2012 to 2015. I was a lab assistant on Project Blackwell. I didn't know what we were really doing until the children started showing side effects. We thought we were helping veterans. That's what they told us. But it was all a lie. She paused, visibly trembling. They took children from shelters, from foster homes, said they were orphans, but I knew at least one had a mother looking for him. They tested cognitive inhibitors, memory alteration protocols. One boy forgot his own name. They wanted that, said it was proof of concept. Elena's blood ran cold. Eva continued. When I told my supervisor I was going to blow the whistle, he threatened me, said I'd disappear into a black site. That's when I found James. He got me out, changed my name, helped me vanish. The video ended. Elena sat frozen for a moment, the weight of it all pressing down. Her father had helped a woman escape from a government-backed experiment involving children. He had risked his life, and eventually ended his life as Richard Morgan to keep her safe. And now they knew Elena had found this. The photos, the documents. The trail was active again. The last item in the box was a small leather wallet. Inside were 2 IDs, one for Richard Morgan and one for James Holden. There was also a note scribbled on a scrap of paper in her father's handwriting. If they come, don't run. Go to Eva. Trust her. She knows what to do. The question now wasn't whether she should get involved. She already was. The better question was, who's watching me now? Elena zipped the duffel bag closed, slid the flash drive into her coat pocket, and exited the storage unit. She made sure the lock clicked shut, then walked briskly to her car, her heart pounding with every step. There were too many questions, and only one person left who could answer them. Eva Sinclair. It took Elena the better part of a day to find. Her diva Sinclair had left few digital footprints, no active social media, no recent property records. Her old employment data led nowhere. If it hadn't been for the detail in her father's files, the mention of Oak Hollow, a small town north of the city, Elena wouldn't have known where to begin. Oak Hollow was the kind of place most people drove through without stopping. A single diner, a post office, and a general store that also functioned as a gas station. The town sat beneath a ridge of pine-covered hills, quiet and unassuming. Perfect, she realized, for someone trying to disappear. Elena parked across from the post office and stepped out into the chill air. Her breath fogged in front of her as she checked the photo again. Eva, walking with the boy, Jason. It was taken 2 years ago, according to the timestamp. There was no address in her father's notes. Just a description: blue house, white trim, edge of Pinehurst Road, north side, no mailbox. Keep distance. Pinehurst Road ran past a cluster of weathered homes and up toward the hills. Elena drove slowly, scanning each house until she saw it. Blue paint, peeling slightly, white trim around the windows, no mailbox. Her heart hammered. She pulled over and got out. The house looked quiet, but not abandoned. Curtains were drawn. A tricycle sat on the porch, faded from sun but clearly used. She walked up the path, hesitated, then knocked. The seconds dragged. Then the door opened. Eva Sinclair stood in the doorway, older than in the video, her features sharpened by caution. Her eyes narrowed the moment she saw Eleanor. "Who are you?" Her voice was firm, but not unkind. "My name is Elena Morgan," she said. "My father was Richard Morgan, or James Holden." Eva's face changed instantly. The suspicion dropped, replaced by a stunned, quiet recognition. She stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled of cedar and coffee, sparse furniture, a modest living room, toys tucked neatly into a corner, a framed drawing on the wall, clearly a child's, a rocket ship with "To the Moon, Mom" scrawled underneath. "Sit down," Eva said. "I didn't think I'd ever hear that name." Again, Elena sat. "He died 3 days ago." Eva looked away, jaw tightening. "I know. You know? I've been watching the obituaries, just in case." A silence settled between them, the weight of unspoken history. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out the photo. This was in his study. Eva took it gently, eyes flicking over the image. "I remember that day," she said. "We met in Millridge Park. He brought books for Jason, said they were from a friend." "You knew him well?" Eva nodded slowly. "He saved my life and my son's. I'd be in a cell or a grave if not for him." Elena sat back, heart pounding. "I read the files about Project Blackwell, about what they were doing." Eva looked down. "Then you know why I ran." "I don't know everything," Elena said. "Only fragments. I was hoping you could fill in the rest." Eva hesitated. "You're sure you want to know?" she asked. "Your father kept you out of it for a reason." Elena met her gaze. "He didn't just leave me clues. He asked me to find you. He trusted you." Eva seemed to weigh that. Then she stood and walked into the kitchen, returning with a folder. She handed it to Elena. Inside were handwritten notes, photographs and newspaper clippings, more evidence, proof. But one thing stood out, a sealed envelope with the name James on the front. Elena looked up. "I never opened it," Eva said. "He gave it to me in case something happened to him, said I'd know when it was time." Elena opened it with trembling fingers. The letter inside was short. "Eva, if this reaches you, I'm gone. Protect Elena. She's smarter than me and stubborn. She'll come looking. Help her understand. Show her where this all leads, but be careful. The people behind Blackwell won't stop." You and I made mistakes, but protecting Jason wasn't one of them. You're stronger than you think, Jeva. Wiped her eyes. I thought he was being paranoid, she whispered. I didn't know he was being hunted again. Elena leaned forward. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning, please. Eva took a breath. I joined Aegis Solutions, right out of grad school. Thought it was a medical research firm. They were working on something called Project Blackwell, originally framed as PTSD treatment for veterans, but the data didn't add up. Subjects weren't soldiers. They were kids. Children, Elena said. Eva nodded grimly. Orphans, fosters, taken under the radar. They were testing memory suppression protocols, chemical and neurological. Some kids forgot basic language, others forgot trauma. One forgot his entire family. They called it a breakthrough. I called it criminal. Elena felt a sick lurch in her stomach. I blew the whistle. Or tried to, Eva said. My supervisor threatened me. Then one day, James showed up at my door, said he'd been tracking Blackwell for years. He got me and Jason out, changed our names, buried our trails. Why didn't he go public? He tried, Eva said, but the evidence kept disappearing. Witnesses vanished. People turned up dead. He said the rot went deep, somewhere, inside the government, that they were laundering funding through military grants. Blackwell wasn't a rogue project. It was sanctioned. Elena stared at her. So, where does that leave us? Eva looked at her sharply. It leaves us in danger. If they know you have the files, they'll come. Elena pulled the flash drive from her coat. Then we get ahead of them. We go public. Eva shook her head. You think they haven't planned for that? Every leak has a counter-narrative. Discredit, disappear, deny. They've done it before. Then what? Eva was silent for a moment. Then she said, there's one person who might still help. He worked with James, inside. A federal agent who tried to get Blackwell shut down. Name: Malcolm. Trent. Last I heard, he went underground. But if anyone knows how to fight this, it's him. Where do we find him? Eva hesitated, then walked to a drawer and pulled out an old phone. There's a number in here. One he gave me. He said not to use it unless it was life or death. She handed it over. Elena took it. I think this qualifies. As she stood to leave, Eva touched her arm. James loved you, she said. Even when he kept secrets, you were always at the center. Don't forget that. Elena nodded, tears pricking her eyes. I won't. She walked out into the cool air, the phone in her hand, and the truth pressing down like a storm. The next step was clear. She had to find Malcolm Trent. The burner phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds in Elena's hand. She stood outside. The blue house, the gravel of Eva's driveway crunching under her boots as she paced. The cold bit into her jacket, but her blood was running too hot to notice. Every nerve hummed with the choice she was about to make. She flipped open the phone and dialed the number Eva had given her. It rang once, twice. Then a click. No greeting, just a low voice. How did you get this number? Elena swallowed. My name is Elena Morgan. My father was James Holden. Silence. Then, what's your location? Why? Who are you? I'm the one your father trusted when he had no one left. If you're really his daughter, get somewhere quiet and off-grid, then call me back. The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone, stunned. This was the man her father had trusted. She turned and walked quickly back into Eva's house. We have a problem, Elena said. He answered, but he didn't want to talk over the line. Eva exhaled slowly. He's paranoid for a reason. Do you trust him? I trust that he hated Blackwell as much as your father did. Elena nodded. Then we find him. By nightfall, they were on the road. Eva knew of an old cabin her father had used before, tucked deep in the Birchlow forest, 2 hours west. It had no electricity, no phone lines, perfect for what came next. Jason, Eva's son, stayed with a friend in town. Elena had seen him only briefly, a shy, intelligent boy with eyes far too serious for his age. She wondered how much he knew, how much he remembered. The forest cabin was as remote as promised. One room, a wood-burning stove, and the sound of nothing but wind through the trees. No cell signal, no cameras, no trace. Eva lit a kerosene lamp. Elena opened the burner phone and redialed the number. This time, the voice answered with a code. "Blackwell burns at midnight." Elena replied with the code phrase her father had, written in the margins of one of his files. "Only shadows remain." A pause. Then, "Coordinates incoming. Meet in 3 hours. Come alone." Before Elena could ask where, the call cut off. Seconds later, a text appeared. Just GPS coordinates and a time. Eva looked over her shoulder. "That's the old rail yard in Norsby, abandoned since 2010. Is it a trap?" Eva's jaw tightened. "Maybe, but it's also our only shot." Elena left Eva behind and drove out into the darkness. The Norsby rail yard was a rusting skeleton of industry, collapsed fences, twisted tracks and shadows as far as the eye could see. Elena arrived just before midnight, headlights off, flashlight in hand. She followed the coordinates on foot. She passed rusted train cars, broken down equipment. Then she saw him. A man in a black coat stepped out from behind a derailed freight car. He was tall, late 40s, and wore a low-brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes. "Malcolm Trent?" she asked. He nodded. "You look like him." Elena stepped closer. "My father trusted you. I need to know why." Trent looked around, then gestured for her to follow. They ducked into a gutted operations car. He shut the door behind them and lit a single lantern. "I worked in internal security," he began. "Contracted through the DoD. I oversaw audits for experimental projects. That's how I found Blackwell." "And you didn't stop it." "I tried," he said bitterly. "Your father and I both did. But Blackwell was buried under so many layers of clearance and shell corporations, no one could trace it. When James went public the first time, they framed him for espionage. He said the rot was deep." Trent laughed grimly. "It's worse now. Blackwell didn't die. It evolved. They're not just testing memory suppression anymore. They've moved into synthetic manipulation, neural rewriting." Elena's stomach churned. "Is Eva safe?" "For now. But if they've traced your steps, she's in danger. And now that you've made contact with me, so are you." Elena clenched her fists. "Then tell me how to end it." Trent opened a briefcase and slid a thick dossier across the table. "These are the names, the funders, the shadow entities keeping Blackwell alive. We leak this, smart, slow, strategic, and we can expose them." Elena opened the file. She saw names. Government contractors, senators, pharmaceutical companies, all complicit. Your father died to protect this. You decide what you want to do with it. 2 days later, Eleanor sat in a nondescript hotel room, her laptop open and a secure connection. Liv. She uploaded the files to 5 journalists, 2 watchdog organizations, and 1 international tribunal. In her message, she included only one line. "My name is Elena Morgan. I have nothing left to lose. The world deserves the truth." She hit send, then she shut the laptop. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks since Elena had sent the files into the world, since she'd chosen to carry the weight her father had borne alone for so long. The days since had unfolded like a fever dream. News cycles erupting with leaked documents, senators caught issuing panicked denials, shadowy companies closing offices overnight, and international agencies beginning quiet inquiries behind closed doors. But the silence that followed was louder. The story hadn't gone viral, not in the way Elena hoped. Some outlets ran it as a fringe conspiracy, government brainwashing experiment exposed. Others dismissed it entirely. The deeper networks, the ones Eva and Trent had warned her about, were clearly still pulling strings. Algorithms were burying articles. Whistleblowers had gone quiet. The noise came and went in flashes, until, slowly, it disappeared from the public eye. Elena had expected it. But it still burned. She stayed off the grid, rotating hotels, using cash. Eva and Jason moved again. New names, new state. Malcolm Trent vanished without a word. She hadn't heard from him since the second week. Every time she turned on a burner phone, she expected the click of someone listening. But no one came. And that was almost worse. On the 22nd day, Eleanor drove to the cemetery. The wind rolled through the barren trees like a breath held too long. Her father's grave was modest, simple granite, no frills, just his name, James Holden Morgan, 1958, 2025. There is no courage without consequence. She stood there for a long time, remembering everything, how she'd once thought he was just a kind, quiet man. A professor with no ambition beyond the walls of academia, how she'd believed the distance between them was her fault, that maybe he couldn't connect with her, not after her mother died. Now she understood the truth. He'd spent years sacrificing his peace, his name, and eventually his life to protect others, to protect her. And still, he never asked for recognition. Elena knelt beside the grave and laid down the photo she'd taken from his study. The one of him, Eva, and Jason, a family he'd helped create even if it could never be acknowledged. "I hope you found peace," she whispered. "I'll find mine, one day." She stood, wiping tears from her cheeks. She didn't know what came next. She had no illusions of victory. Blackwell wasn't dead. It was injured, cornered maybe, but still alive. But she also knew this: someone would remember. The seeds were planted. The truth was out there, even if buried for now, and she would keep telling it. Every chance she got. She walked back to her car, started the engine, and drove into the wind-blown dusk, the sun setting behind her. Not running, just ready. Epilogue. Months later, a small, independent podcast released a serialized investigation called The Blackwell Files. Quiet at first, then louder. It caught fire not through headlines, but whispers. Through communities who knew the cost of secrets, of silence. One day, buried deep in the credits of the final episode, a simple line appeared. This story exists because of Eleanor Morgan, and because one man refused to forget what mattered most. Somewhere, in a secure location in a new name and life, Elena smiled. Her father wasn't a shadow anymore. He was a legacy,